Hello, everybody. My name is Alexandre. Happy to welcome you here. I can see people are slowly joining. Welcome everyone, and welcome to this webinar of EDMO BELUX. EDMO BELUX is the European Disinformation Media Observatory, Digital Media Observatory hub for Belgium and Luxembourg. My name is Alexandre Alaphilippe. I work at EU Disinfolab, which is one of the partners of the EDMO BELUX hub. I have the great pleasure for our session today, which is a session to put together the very good initiatives that are delivering studies on the state of disinformation in Belgium and Luxembourg. And today we're going to present the work of Crossover, and I'm very happy to welcome today Guillaume, Nelly, and Amaury from Check First that are part of this Crossover project. As a disclaimer, EU Disinfolab is also part of this project. So it's close friends that I'm happy to give the floor to today. They're going to explain their latest study on how YouTube algorithms of search and recommendation have been behaving after the ban of Russia Today, with very interesting insights and many questions to be drawn based on this study. How is it going to work? We're going to have a presentation of the study, and then we will have a Q&A. Just for Q&A session, and just for making sure like everybody can have a nice time using Q&A, we're not going to use the chat box of Zoom, but actually we're going to use Slido. If you know Slido, it's a very interesting tool that allows to collect a bit of information and to manage Q&A. So actually to be able to join and to ask the Q&A, because we're going to work exclusively with that tool, you can go with your laptop or your phone or your tablet or any kind of connected device to slido.com and use the hashtag EDMO BELUX. And please, once you have done this, you can start saying where you, in which sector do you work. As we will see how many people are joining the Q&A, I'm going to ask you to actually start to have responses. So 3 responses right now. Please use this and keep your phone plugged and close to your fingers, because we're going to use this for the Q&A. So while you answer this, I can see that we have, a little bit more than 25 participants, so we should have more than 11 responses to this poll. So while you are doing this, I'm very happy to introduce and to give the floor to Guillaume, Nelly, and Amaury at Check First. Please tell us a bit who you are, what you've been doing, and what you're going to present today. You have a bit more than 25 minutes to do so, so we have even a bit more time for questions afterwards. If you are French speaking and you would like to have the session in French, there is another session in French later today, and I will forward you the link if you want to reach the French speaking session. Guillaume, Nelly, Amaury, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Alex, and thank you for the opportunity. My name is Guillaume Costa. I'm a French national, but the CEO of a Finland-based startup called Check First, and we are a member of the Crossover project together with Alex and EU Disinfolab and other partners we're going to talk through during the presentation. And we're delighted to talk to you about the content recommendation algorithm monitoring that we've been doing as a part of the Crossover project. Maybe I can give the floor to Nelly to introduce herself. She's going to be presenting with me.
Good afternoon, everyone. Very glad to be here to discuss our CGTN investigation this afternoon. My name is Nelly Payeux. I'm the CKO and co-founder of Check First, and I'm also French and a journalist by training.
Hi everybody, I'm Amaury. I'm the CTO of Check First, and I act as a lead developer on the crossover project. So I'm there to answer any technical question that you would ask yourself.
So there you have it. In a nutshell, Check First is a journalists developer company trying to look at problems in a technical way, but also having the background of being a journalist. I used to be a journalist for French PSBs for more than 20 years. So let's talk about Crossover. So Crossover is a project that was funded by the European Commission, and we're going to address today the topic of YouTube algorithms, and specifically the way they do present state-controlled media, particularly in the context of the war in between Russia and Ukraine. And as a consequence of the war, the ban, the step, very strong, that the European Union has taken by banning, among others, RT as a media, both on traditional media outlets like television and also on social networks. A few words about the consortium itself. So Crossover is a project that is led by 4 parties. EU Disinfo that doesn't need any introduction anymore. Check First, we just did that. Apache, who's a Dutch language investigation media outlet in Belgium, and Savoir Devenir, which is an NGO specialized in media literacy and training. So what we do at Crossover is we kind of look at these guys. We are monitoring the big platforms and in the way they do use what is called content recommendation algorithms. So the platforms, as you can see, are YouTube, very big actor, Twitter, Google in the search bar. So when you type something in the search bar, there is an auto-completion that happens. So when you start the sentence in the Google search bar, what is suggested to you, that is algorithmic. We also do monitor Google News, which is when you are inputting a search word, which news articles are presented to you as a user and in which order. Reddit, which is used a tiny bit in Belgium, Facebook public groups and pages are also monitored. And the last addition to the project is Odyssey. You can think of Odyssey, if you don't know about the platform, as a no filter YouTube. It's a video platform where there is no content moderation. So you would see a lot of weird content on that specific platform. And of course, the geographical scope of the project is Belgium, a very interesting country for many reasons. First, of them being a bilingual country, well, trilingual, in fact, but with 2 big language groups being Flemish and French, and also having a population that through these languages gets a lot of external influence from the neighboring Netherlands and France. So that's for the kind of rules of the game at Crossover. So we monitor these guys, we do it in Belgium. And the focus of the project is to look at ways the algorithms work in terms of content recommendation. So just a few words on what there are. There are 3 main parts, 3 main groups where you could find recommendation algorithms. First of all is when you click on something, then content is ordered, it's curated in some way when you browse a specific platform, and the order in which that content is displayed goes through an algorithm that is choosing to put some content forward and before other pieces of content. Then there's the simple fact of browsing a platform where you just, like on Twitter, for instance, you would see the trends, and then you would be presented with a list of topics that would be ordered without any other user interaction than the fact to go on the platform. And then there's the active search when you're looking for something. So you type in Russia into Google or YouTube and hit enter, and then you would have a list of results, and that list of results is algorithmically sorted. So that's basically what we are monitoring. We're going to discuss specifically YouTube today because it's quite pregnant to see, quite important to see the ways that the algorithms work, and it's quite significant, and also there's thumbnails and pictures to look at, but it's a massive, of course, platform to monitor, and has a big influence in the way people consume content, even as regard news. So the way we do collect information in YouTube, we do have a set list of keywords, search words that we would input into YouTube search bar. And that is done automatically by machines. And I'm going to develop how we do that in a moment. But let's say you're looking for Russia in YouTube. So you would type in the word Russia into the search bar, you hit enter, and you will be presented with a list of 24 videos, and more of that, more than 24 if you can keep on scrolling down the page. We collect the first 24 results. That's what most people are seeing on the results page, and we collect metadata about these videos. So we collect the order in which they are presented, the title of the video, the number of views, description, etc., etc. And then we do click on each and every of these videos and collect everything that comes in the autoplay queue. So if you have, let's say, the first result being a video from RT, so that would be before the ban in February. If you click on that video, there is an autoplay queue on YouTube where as soon as one video is finished, the next one will start. So we would collect these 20 videos and also collect all metadata associated with these videos in the same fashion, so that we have two levels, if you will, of algorithmic recommendation. The first one being search results and an ordering, a curation of these results, and then the recommendation in the autoplay queue. I'm going to give the floor to Nelly to develop what has happened since the start of the Ukraine-Russian war.
Thank you, Guillaume. To give you a bit of context for the investigation, as you remember, if we see the bigger picture, on 24th of February, Russia started invading Ukraine. And then on the 1st of March, the EU decided to ban Russia Today and Sputnik, which are both state media outlets from EU countries. It was declared by Ursula von der Leyen in a speech on 27th of February, when she said, "We are developing tools to ban their toxic," so Russia Today and Sputnik's toxic and harmful disinformation in Europe. Technically, what does it mean to ban toxic and harmful content for users in Europe? Well, it means that EU users are not able anymore to access RT's main social media outlets, and their content is also not allowed to be broadcasted both on TV and on social media channels. So just before digging deeper into the data, Guillaume said it, but I would like to repeat it. The scope of the project is that we put ourselves in the shoes of a Belgian user typing Russia, Russie in French, in the YouTube search bar. The good news is that before the EU ban, we already started collecting data, and we realized it allowed us to turn back time and realize that the situation was that Russia Today was already a powerful social media outlet spreading Russia discourse in French. It was already highly recommended by YouTube algorithm. As you can see on data we gathered with Social Blade, there is a clear rise in February 2022 with almost 38 million views on their video. They nearly doubled their numbers. On the same month, they also gained 19,000 subscribers, which is an unprecedented peak for the channel. That's data we observed on Social Blade, but we saw the same pattern in our YouTube dashboards, which is that on the day of the invasion, so 24th of February, Russia Today was the second most recommended channel after performing a search. but also the second most recommended channel after in the autoplay, as Guillaume explained before. The announcement of the military operation by Vladimir Putin was recommended 18 times out of 24 and averaged to be in the second position on the recommendation list. So what we can conclude on the data is that right before the ban of Russia Today and of Russia Today by EU countries, not only did they gain video views, but they also gained subscribers, and they managed to reach the top recommendation and search results on YouTube until the ban, as you can see on the chart on your screen, where the content was hidden from EU users. So now we are wondering what are the consequences of such a ban. Well, Russia Today leaves an empty seat, and as we continued our little investigation, we continued to monitor, and we saw a new stakeholder, which you can see in brown on the charts which are on your screen, which is CGTN Français. So what you see on your screen is just slide before Guillaume, what you can see on your screen. Okay, so just to give a quick definition of CGTN. CGTN is the China Global Television Network. It's the international branch of CCTV. It is intended to spread Chinese government worldviews in different language, and it is controlled, I have to say, by the Communist Party. So what we observed is that after the ban, CGTN rises in videos recommendation, but also in search results. What you can see there represents the place of CGTN in March 2022. So the first chart is the place of CGTN globally between other social media, other media channels on YouTube. And the second one is dedicated to CGTN. Basically, they were able to multiply by 10 their video recommendation in less than a month. In 2 months, CGTN also achieved to be the first recommended channel for a user performing a search on Russia. On April the 12th, there were 7 videos out of 24 in the top results, which were in pretty good position, as you can see, because there is one in the first position, 4th position, 7th position, etc., etc. So basically what it means is that Belgian users who would look for the keyword Russia on the 12th of April would be more likely to be recommended a video from China Global Television Network in French, as it happens the same way for Russia Today a month before. Those data are also corroborated by Social Blade. What you can see on the chart is the rise of CGTN after the ban. They gained 13.5 million views in March, 15.6 million views in April. They gained 41,000 subscribers in March. So they also managed to gain more visibility and more audience. That's the first conclusion we draw from the investigation, but I'm going to give the floor to Guillaume, because what you have to understand is that what I just presented you is based on the YouTube API, YouTube official API, which is basically what YouTube gives for to researchers and developers for statistics or research, etc. But as we work to tackling this information, we had to double check our findings. So we decided to build a monitoring network to see if the data matches, which Guillaume is going to present to you right now.
Thank you, Nelly. So in a nutshell, the product crossover started before the war. We had observed that RT France was quite a big actor on YouTube. Then the war happens, the ban happens, there's a void in recommendations, and a few days and weeks after that, there's a new state-controlled media that takes the same numbers, basically, in the charts than RT France. So all of that data, as Nelly just said, is coming from the official way YouTube communicates data to researchers. It's a a kind of default way, because the API they use or they provide us with is not developed for researchers, it's developed for people making apps, and YouTube just gives it to researchers also to get access to the data. But that allows me to talk to you about the originality of the Crossover project, because what we did, we wanted to double check that and to see if that reality of YouTube's results is also existing from the user's point of view. So we built a network of these tiny computers. Don't worry, we put them into nice boxes before we handed them out to volunteers. But these computers, what they are doing is they are simulating users as if they were browsing all the outlets I was showing at the beginning of the presentation, so YouTube, Facebook, Reddit, etc., and performing searches, collecting data all day long, several times a day. In the case of YouTube, it's twice a day, going through that list of keywords that we have defined among the consortium, among which Russia, which is today's focus. So in a nutshell, what these computers do, they are operating a computer, if you will, as if a human was before the computer typing in Russia. We are emulating browsing with these computers. It's going faster than having a bunch of volunteers doing the same work, but it's the same idea. And the other originality of the project is that we spread these computers across Belgium in both Dutch-speaking areas and French-speaking areas. At the time of data collection, we had 7 of these computers operating. We now have 8. And the specificity of that is we put those into people's homes. One thing you have to understand, when we do research usually about any platform, YouTube or other, we would use servers being in data centers or computers being, that can be easily identified by the platforms. By using these small computers that we are putting into volunteers' homes, we are just pretending to be normal users, and it gives a more real picture of the situation. So as you can see, we have these computers collecting data in Hainaut, East Flanders, West Flanders, Liège, Limbourg, Antwerpen, and Brussels. And they've been running for quite a long time. If you go back to the 12th of April, which is quite an interesting date, you can see in that table some results about the number of times videos from these providers were recommended by the algorithms on these mini computers. So that date corresponds to the peak of recommendation that we observed at Crossover as regards CGTN Français' presence in algorithmic content recommendation. As you can see, for each of these users, you will have a large predominance of CGTN Français content. Even France 24 or LCI or Europe 1, which are very well-established media outlets, French-speaking media outlets. And of course, we talked about French-speaking outlets, but we did the same for Dutch, for the Dutch language also. So what we see here is that even though CGTN was nearly unknown before the war, it was overly recommended by the YouTube algorithm when you typed in the term Russia. And that was confirmed across the country in Belgium. So the direct conclusion of that, when a Belgian user typed Russia in the search bar on YouTube, they were more likely to see more CGTN Français content as a result of these recommendation algorithms than anything else, any other content provider. Of course, that raises a set of questions, and we did ask these questions to YouTube. We sent them an email on the 18th of May, in a very candid way, telling where we are. And we have to stress at this point that they knew, or at least someone at YouTube knew about the project, because they had granted us a special access to the API, not in terms of data quality, but in terms of quantity. They gave us a lot of credits to use the API, a lot more, 100 times more than what any other researcher would get without asking. And some of our colleagues today are struggling to get the same level of access to the API. So long story short, YouTube knew where we are, who we were, but they did not respond to that email. We are almost 3 weeks after we sent that email, and we didn't still get an answer on why CGTN Français content was overly represented in the content recommendation system. So we have a few questions. All the data we have been collecting, we did in such a fashion where our users, our simulated users, were new users to YouTube. We were not logged into our Google accounts. So that means that YouTube would not know about how the browsing history or any specific behavior we would have on the site. It was just starting from fresh every time. So even without the history of a logged in user, we could see that predominance of the state-run media outlets, that is CGTN. That's the first question. The other one is CGTN was predominant where you were specifically typing and searching for the word Russia, but oddly enough, if you typed vaccine or COVID, we wouldn't see so much Chinese content. Maybe it doesn't exist officially anymore. So that's also a question. Why is it only a focus on CGTN in terms of recommendation for the word Russia? And another question we can ask ourselves is, we now have 8 computers in operation simulating users across Belgium. What would we see if we had more computers in Belgium? What would we see if we had a denser network across another country or the entire continent? What other trends could we see? We don't have the answer because we don't have these computers yet, but we suspect we'd see other things. So if you haven't created your profile on the interface to ask questions, here's the QR code again. But otherwise, I'm happy to give back the floor to Alex for the Q&A session.
Thank you, Guillaume, and thank you for this presentation, which already is bringing many questions from the audience. So as a reminder, we're using Slido for collecting all the questions and not the chat. For the Q&A, we don't see the chat in front of your computer. So if you ask questions there, we might actually not see them at all. So please log in at EDMO BELUX. You can ask your question there and actually even vote for questions. Guillaume, first question. What was the position of CGTN before the Russia ban, to specify how was it ranked in relation to Russia Today channel?
Absolutely, I'm happy to repeat that. Very, very low. So basically, it was not known as a media outlet. So it's very interesting to see that after the ban and after a few days, they would be more recommended than very well established actors like France 24 or LCI or Europe 1.
Thank you. Question from Mr. or Mrs. Anonymous. How does the language of the search term influence the results? Like, do Flemish users are really looking for Rusland, or do they search in English? How do you deal with that?
That's a question I don't really have an answer for, because what we did is we did put Rusland in Flemish in our list of keywords to specifically look for that word in the local language. We cannot really see how the population is curing YouTube or searching stuff on YouTube. What we can do is have a list of words people are most likely to use, and also because we follow certain situations like COVID or Russia. So we would use those in local language and then see the results, but we have no insights on what words the general population is using.
Thank you, Guillaume. Other question, why did you type Russia? Have you tested Ukraine as a search term, and what were the results there?
Yes, we also did use Ukraine. We chose to talk about Russia because that's where we saw the most interesting pattern in terms of replacement of RT France content by CGTN. When we look at the other words, we would also see a mix of outlets being presented to the users, but it was more clear in terms of, well, if you were using the word Russia. So in terms of, number of times that CGTN content would be put before other types of providers by the YouTube algorithms, that was the clearest answer. But I have to stress that the results are publicly available. So you can see for yourself, and you can actually see all data from all of the computers on a public dashboard. You're going to have to go to dashboard.crossover.social. We're going to put the address for you to use.
Thank you. Very important to remind that actually the keywords are public, so you can actually see what are the keywords monitored. Maybe Guillaume can come back a bit later because there are already some comments on that. Were the questions already on short keywords, or were there also more complicated queries, such as like Russian invasion of Ukraine?
There was a decision being made at the start of the project that we would be using keywords and not expressions. That's an editorial decision that we had made. So I guess, Alex, you are as qualified as I to answer that question.
I think at some point, like tracking all like linked requests would be interesting, but also like adding a lot to the crawlers, because like it's a lot of data crawling through the user simulation. What we've been doing, for instance, is also trying to look at what were the different suggestions. That's another part of the project, like looking at Google Suggest and seeing like when you type some kind of words, what are the most recommended questions that you can get. So that could be a way to do it. But we try to be very simple in the keyword selection there, to just try to avoid as much as we can bias in how the question is framed. But again, this is really a starting point for a project like that. There are many things that can be built out of this technology in this project. And if you have any ideas on how to go further, I'm pretty sure Crossover would be happy to look further into these.
But also from a technical point of view, I mean, when you use one word, it's kind of neutral. Maybe don't think about a Russian conflict, but think about a pandemic. When you type in vaccine, if you don't use any adjectives or qualifiers, then you are giving a neutral query to the algorithm. And then you can measure, do you get some pro-vaccination content or anti-vaccine vaccination content, and you can try to draw a balance in between the two and see if it's weighing one side or the other. So being quite neutral is easier when using single words, because as soon as you do add other words or form an expression, then you can, as Alex said, bias the query.
Thank you. I assume YouTube keeps a profile based on IP address, even if not logged. Would the volunteers' real YouTube history influence the results seen by the simulated users? Excellent question. Thank you.
Absolutely. I mean, we can make assumptions there. We don't know how YouTube is keeping track of us. We can also, I mean, if you go on a website that is called amiunique.com, you will see all the metrics that can render you recognizable on the internet, even if you are not logged in. So you're perfectly right. There are many other ways for any service to recognize you online. It can be the type of computer you're using, the operating system, the browser, the IP address is a big one. So we cannot suppress the idea that they would recognize us, but we are giving ourselves more chances to have neutral results by multiplying the number of user simulators across a country, rather than just doing all our requests from one data center somewhere at a VPS vendor, if that term rings a bell. But just, you know, multiplying the chances of getting more diversified inputs. Where it makes sense also to have these computers spread across the country is to see the weight of language zones or areas where one language is used more than the other. We also measured then in you know, some localities in between Flemish-speaking Belgium and French-speaking Belgium, we would have different results or more balanced results than when we go in French-speaking or purely Dutch-speaking Belgium.
Thank you, Guillaume. Could it be simply that Russia or CGTN are just using the right tags to get more attention on YouTube, and other news outlets are less smarter than them?
Well, it's quite pertinent as a question. We don't believe it's the case, because we have other actors that are using search engine optimization and tagging very efficiently. If you look, for instance, at the videos produced by Europe 1, they use much more optimization in the way they present the content at CGTN. So it might be a factor, but it cannot explain alone why CGTN's videos were much more recommended than the ones from Europe 1, for instance.
I would add that it's basically one of the derivative questions that the project has asked to YouTube. It's like, what are the criteria that makes this video more recommended than others? So that would be helpful than not trying to guess what's happening, but trying to know actually what are the main criteria that can help to have this recommendation system, amplifying some videos and some channels and some not. Don't you think that results are objective in the sense that users looking for information on YouTube are generally looking for alternative media? So like a question on media consumption.
You're making an assumption. I would suppose you work for a media entity. I also work for a media entity for quite a long time. I'm not sure you can encapsulate people using YouTube as in search of YouTube media or of alternative media. There's a strong presence of so-called traditional media outlets. There are creators on YouTube today. YouTube is not a cesspool of alternative media. What it is a platform that is more viewed than traditional media. So that's always, you know, a pain in the neck for media outlets to see that they are losing traction and they're losing ways to talk to younger audiences, not only younger audiences, but the audience in general. It's just a place where content exists and there's real quality content existing. So I wouldn't make the assumption that YouTube users are looking for alternative content.
Thank you, Guillaume. Next one, I'm leaving the last one for Tom. Ivan, how do you initiate the user profiles? For instance, gender, age may significantly influence the recommendation. Excellent questions. At
the time being, there is no profile. It's a blank user. It's someone using YouTube for the first time each time. So even though, as was addressed in a previous question, there are some ways for a platform to recognize the computer. There is no login, so there is no persona associated to the profile. That is something that can be done at a later stage of the project, requiring also to create personas and user profiles on different platforms and give them a browsing history. And we have crafted some of these personas, but for the time being, it's fresh out of the egg each time.
Thank you. Unfortunately, YouTube has not answered to your questions. Are there further engagement steps with YouTube, with regulators, with others in the pipeline?
No, they have not answered. I believe that we gave them enough time before starting to, talk about this investigation. So they had a 2 weeks window before we published the results. We are. Maybe I should let you answer, because that's more your side of the project, Alex. The relationships with the platforms and regulators. But we want to have a conversation, basically. Just before I give the mic back to Alex, I mean, our point of view is we don't really care about how the algorithms work. It's passionating. Nobody really knows. Everybody wants to know how they work to game it. We are interested in the results in terms of what the civil society is seeing. The results are that in that case, when you type in Russia, you would be more likely to see a state-controlled media outlet from China that is sometimes friend with Russia, sometimes not, but more likely than not friend. That's the mesmerizing thing for us, is to see the results of the way the algorithms work. And that has to raise some questions, both for the platforms. Yes, they are private companies. Yes, they can do what they want, but there is a threshold in between. The influence they would have on the society must involve politicians. It's like in the 2008 subprime crisis, when you had like these massive flows of money going into big banks. We said they're too big to fail, and there was public intervention. Here, they are too big to be ignored in terms of influence on the public. So I think personally that politicians should set some rules. But again, Alex is more qualified than I am to answer on the next steps from the crossover standpoint.
I think the next steps, like regulation is coming. The Digital Services Act will actually have platforms to respond on how some of the algorithms are actually working. There will be audits of algorithms planned in the DSA. So we are going to touch on that with regulation further. We would like to have everybody in the room to be able to discuss this and to making sure we have a common framework and common spaces to actually discuss that and what are the next steps forward. I think what's interesting here is like we can see for the first time how the consequences of a regulation actually has implications on how information is redistributed online, and that's quite unprecedented at that scale. So it is very interesting to look at this and to see what are the enforcing consequences, and trying to think about what is a solution that we would like to design. I think there is also something that we did not say, but like looking at a Belgian user perspective, lots of the comments of the content recommended on that topic was actually from foreign sources. So whether they are French media, Chinese media, Russian media. So that's like also opens another conversation about like how Belgian users access local media on YouTube and what are the rules that are implemented there. So I think we are touching on many different topics there, and it would be good to have a space with academics, researchers, and society and platforms and regulators on how we want to design common rules for our information landscape. Question from Ivan again. Welcome back, Ivan. By visiting video from search results, you provide implicit feedback that this content is relevant for you, and YouTube kept to recommend it. Have you considered it?
Yes, we have, and that's a very interesting and involved question, Ivan. Thank you. There are two answers to that. The first one is that we clean the what we call crawling sessions in between data collection. So we try to trick the algorithm into thinking. We clean the cookies, basically. I mean, giving a technical answer to a technical question. We do that, but there's a next step also in the data collection process is we are just collecting the URLs of these videos from the computers in Belgium. And then the metadata from the recommendation data is collecting using another technique. So basically, we are not clicking. I simplified during the presentation to make it understandable to the audience that it's as if we click on the videos to see them. But what we do, we do collect the URLs, and we collect the metadata from these videos from another technique in a next step. So I hope that answers your question.
Thank you. I think it's good because we have both very technical questions and very down the stream questions. So thank you to the audience. If we do not have any other question, I'm happy. I can wait maybe 30 seconds because Tom, which I guess is our different Tom Willard at VUB and at EDMO BELUX, great academic people, always trying to summarize things for future research. So I can see no other questions. So Tom, your question is up and we're going to conclude with that one if there are no others. Great work. If you had to summarize what lessons can now be drawn from this investigation regarding YouTube algorithms, and maybe it's not lessons, but like, as you said, Guillaume, at some point, like, what are the new questions that are drawn from this research?
Well, we do understand that the main function of a content recommendation algorithm is to keep users on the platform. And I won't go as far as drafting an intentionality from YouTube into showing dubious content to users, but basically the content algorithm, the content recommendation algorithm is doing what it's asked to be done, to keep the user as long as possible on the platform. So what we can see is that effectively YouTube's computers are doing what is good for their business. They are keeping people on the platform to be served ads for long periods of time. And if you are looking at shady content or questionable content, then it's recognized as something that you would want to consume, and then you are served with more of that content. So as explained earlier, we are not interested into understanding, how to trick the algorithm or how it really works. There's a lot of people trying to explain how algorithm works. I don't think they should be taken too seriously. I mean, you can even see charts. I mean, if you post on a Monday between 9 and 10, you would get 3 more points. I think that's horseshit. But what's interesting to us is to see the consequences, is to stand up and say that these platforms, as opposed to public service broadcasters, for instance, are not fulfilling a mission other than making money for themselves. And there is a dichotomy in between that capitalistic goal that is followed by the platforms and the impact it has on society. And that we are there to count the points and to give arguments also to policymakers for them first to realize the depth of the problem, because I'm not sure all politicians, I mean, just look in your constituency and have a conversation with your MEP, realize what's happening and the scale at which it's happening. One of the conversations we had with Alex at the start of the project, or even before the project started, is when, as a researcher, you were opposing something you saw as a result of content recommendation algorithm. So you saw something shady and you would ring the bell and ask YouTube, why did I see that piece of video when I tapped that? They would say, well, it's more complicated than that, and there's more data points to be considered, it's an isolated case, etc., etc. What we're doing here is we are collecting data at the scale of a country every day, twice a day in the case of YouTube, every hour in the case of Twitter, for instance, or Google, and logging all of that and constituting a large database of opposable truth, of data points and patterns that we feel should not be, that can be opposed to the platforms and hopefully serve as a knowledge basis for policymakers.
Thank you, Guillaume, and thank you all the crossover team and CheckFirst team, Nelly, Amaury, for this very interesting session. Please help us to improve and give some stars. And if you really disliked it, don't feel ashamed to put a 1. Really trying to get some honest feedback there. So as you know, the EDMO BELUX hub, so which is looking at Belgium and Luxembourg, is looking at having regular sessions like this with practitioners, people working in media literacy, in research, in civil society. So we really encourage you to join the hub, to get in touch with the EDMO BELUX on belux.edmo.eu. If you have ideas for studies, if you would like to present some studies that you're doing on disinformation in the Belgium and Luxembourg space, we're really looking forward to have more information, and we'd be happy to have you presenting something at some point. If you also want to know more about the Crossover project, you can go on their website, which is crossover.social. You can see that the different networks are monitoring. It's not only about YouTube, it's also about Google, about Twitter trends, Reddit, Facebook posts. So very interesting things there, and you can contact them directly from the project if you want to do more work with them. I would like to thank you again. Thank you everybody for this very interesting session, and see you around for another EDMO BELUX webinar. Bye-bye.
And don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell. Thank you.